Good morning, Bucknutters. Welcome to the Bucknuts Morning 5 here on Monday, November 21st, 2016. I am Dave Biddle. Very happy to be joined by Patrick Murphy. Happy Michigan week to everybody. Buckeyes favored by 7 points, Patrick. Just your initial thoughts on this matchup Saturday.
Yeah, I think you mentioned the odds there. That 7 points is probably largely due to where the game is going to be played here in Columbus as opposed to up in Ann Arbor. You know, I think they say that you usually get about a field goal from home field advantage, and I'd say this is probably, 3 or 4 points either way. These teams should put on a good one. It's we've seen some tight games in the past between teams that maybe you didn't expect it from, but this year both teams obviously highly ranked. I think it'll be a lot of fun to finally see these two actually go out on the field and get it done as opposed to just, trash talking on social media or fan bases going back and forth or whatnot. We really get to see it play out and see which side walks away with bragging rights for another year.
Yeah, Chapter 2 of Urban Meyer versus Jim Harbaugh and the first time in Ohio Stadium. And there's the quarterback drama on the Michigan side. It looked like, even from the Michigan reporters that Wilton Speight was out for the season, had a broken collarbone. John O'Korn played last week, did not look good. Now you have some of these same reporters saying, there's like a 50-50 chance that, Speight will play, that it wasn't a broken collarbone. It was just a serious injury to his left shoulder, non-throwing shoulder, so he might play. Give me your take on this. Is some of this gamesmanship on Michigan's part? Are you buying this? Just what's your take on the whole quarterback drama up there?
I think it certainly could be gamesmanship. I mean, we saw last year when Michigan State came to town, them, kind of do this similar thing of not letting anyone know what's going to happen. And then even Michigan last week against Indiana brought all the quarterbacks out, had them warm up, didn't really give any indication before the game. If there's a game that you are going to kind of put yourself on the line and, maybe play through some pain, I think this would be it. It would certainly be quite the rallying call to the rest of his teammates if Wilton Speight were able to kind of man up and fight through the pain, come out there and lead his team onto the field in Columbus against the rivals. It would certainly boost their morale heading into this one. But you mentioned O'Korn, and while his numbers aren't great, I think that given we saw the struggle that JT Barrett had up in East Lansing, and there were similar conditions in Ann Arbor, I do think he played all right. I mean, 59-yard passing, 7 for 16 aren't great, but a big 30-yard run when they needed, a big play to kind of boost things later on in the game and stuff like that. So while he's not, the guy they've had all season, I do think he can get some things done. And if we have better weather conditions here, I expect both quarterbacks, whoever they are, to have considerably better days than what we saw this past weekend up in Michigan for both teams.
If Wilton Speight does have a broken collarbone, there's no way he's playing. Then we know it for sure it's just gamesmanship. I mean,
right.
If it is a left shoulder injury, even if it's a serious injury, which everybody agrees on that, it is a serious injury of some sort. Jim Harbaugh's not saying anything about it, but just for clarity, though, for anybody listening, if he does have a broken collarbone, there is no way he's playing.
Yeah, that would be incredible. I mean, to fight through that, I've known athletes and non-athletes who have suffered broken collarbones, and you're pretty immobile. Even if it is, your non-throwing arm, you still, even to like run and move in any sort of athletic way, these guys are usually in slings and they want that kind of stabilized from my non-medical expertise, understanding of this whole situation. But, I can't imagine anyone going out and being able to be at all effective. While it would be, a big boost to morale for Michigan to have him out there, you've got to go with the guy that gives you the best chance to win. And even if, John O'Korn isn't the most talented of their quarterbacks, if he's the healthiest and can help them win on that day, I think you almost risk having things go really bad if you try and put Wilton Speight out there. And even further injury, I don't know the details about the collarbone and what you could do worse to it, but you don't want to risk this kid's potential future or, anything like that because of this. But like I said, if he can go, this is certainly the game to do it in.
Yeah, he seems like a good kid. I hope he's able to play for a couple reasons. I don't want to see anybody, out for the season due to injury, and I don't want any excuses if Ohio State is able to win this game. I want, the best let's have the best versus the best and see who wins. Speaking of if Ohio State beats Michigan, Will Ohio State make the playoff with 11-1 record and no Big Ten title? And let's add this caveat to it. Presume for a second that they are going to stay at number 2 in the college football playoff rankings tomorrow. So they would have to beat Michigan and then drop from 2 to 5th or worse. I don't think that that's even possible. What do you think?
Yeah, last week heading into the rankings, my thought was that, it would depend on what the committee valued. And when the committee chair spoke after, the show on his teleconference, he was asked about the conference championships, if that mattered, and he said, when it comes to a tiebreaker, we look at that, but we look at it as the same as head-to-head. We look at it as all these other things, and then he was asked about teams from 2 conferences, and he said, we haven't experienced that yet, but it's more or less something, it's not impossible, basically. So that kind of changed my perception on the whole thing. I think that they recognize, assuming Ohio State wins this next game against Michigan, what the Buckeyes have done this year. Even this 1-point win last week against Michigan State, the committee, I assume, will look at it as another tough road win for the Buckeyes in what is arguably the best conference in college football, which is something we obviously weren't saying a couple years ago, but it's nice to kind of have that in your back pocket now. But to answer your question, I think the Buckeyes will be just fine. Win this game, even if it's an ugly win, you just need to beat Michigan. They're obviously respected, and I think they'll be okay. And even, I don't think you rule out the Big Ten championship yet. We just saw Michigan State really put everything out there to get a win, and obviously it was against Ohio State and whatnot. But their chance to play spoilers, and these young kids that are playing for Michigan State right now are really trying to give it their all. They've got a lot to play for the future, which is why D'Antonio is kind of turned for them. And I think that you might see them really give Penn State a run. So don't rule out the potential for a Big Ten title game. And, I guess you can debate whether that's good or bad for the Buckeyes if they can get in without having to play anything.
I was just about to say that. I was so glad you brought that up because I've heard Ohio State fans say that. I've had people tweet at me saying, wouldn't it actually be good for Ohio State at this point to beat Michigan and then hope that Penn State actually wins so Ohio State, A, doesn't have to have the threat of a loss, which would knock them out, and B, keeps them, another week free of injuries. You don't have to play in another violent football game. You just get to be healthy and just get ready for the playoff. And, I thought about it. First, my initial reaction to that question was, no, you want Michigan State to win. You want to play for the Big Ten title. You want to make sure that you control your own destiny and you can win the Big Ten title. Then I thought about it more. They do control their own destiny, so that's out the window. And, yeah, as crazy as it is to say, I think it would be better for Ohio State to make the college football playoff at 11-1 with no Big Ten title than to try and risk winning the Big Ten title, though I think they would beat Wisconsin in a rematch, and then have to risk injuries, too. What would be your answer to that question?
Yeah, I think, like you said, it's certainly an interesting, proposition for them because as a player, as a coach, as a competitor, you'd want to win the Big Ten. I mean, back in the day, that was, obviously there was a national championship and you got it based on rankings and things like that. But, winning the Big Ten meant something, and I think it still means something to the players. But the college football playoff and, before that the BCS certainly changed the way they look at things, bowl games and such. So, that's the ultimate prize these days. And if they can get to that and, be a little bit healthier than their competitors, that's certainly an advantage. Also, like you mentioned, there's the potential for a loss. Well, I agree with you. I think Ohio State would beat Wisconsin. We saw them do it in Madison. Beating a team twice in one season is hard in a sport like this. They got a first-hand look at the Buckeyes and, can kind of game plan off of that. So, I think it would be a bit of an advantage for them if they could do it, which, as we said, we think they can. While, I think the competitive side wants to go in and win the Big Ten and have as many, wins in your back pocket, trophies, all that stuff, it might work out for the best if they can get in without a Big Ten title game that they have to worry about.
Great insights from Patrick Murphy. Really appreciate it, Patrick. Patrick and myself and Steve Hellwagon will be over at the WAC today. It's a huge day because the Buckeyes go on lockdown after today. We're getting Urban Meyer at 11:45 a.m. Then we're getting a cavalcade of players, up to 10 players from noon until 2 p.m. So keep it locked to Bucknuts all through today, all through tomorrow, all through the entire week leading up to the game, including Thanksgiving. We're not taking days off. We'll take a little time to eat some turkey, but keep it locked to Bucknuts all week. You won't be disappointed. Thanks again to Patrick Murphy, and thanks to all listeners for tuning in to the show. I appreciate it. I hope everyone has a great day. Let's hear some Buckeye swag, best damn band in the land.